they've tried to do whatever they can for Steph Curry, and they've ended up at this point where they're at right now. And they, I feel like, know that the next year may be difficult. And I think they're just saying, look, we can see the writing on the wall perhaps with next year. And yes, we know that Steph doesn't have a lot of years left, and he probably doesn't want to waste any on really bad teams.
Yes.
Not that they're going to be really bad necessarily, but I think what they're doing is they're setting the table so that the Bay Area and Warrior fans know that this decision is all on Steph Curry. They've done what they've could up to this point. Again, they're at the position they're at. They're going to have some money next year, so that bodes well. But I think what they're really doing is just saying to everybody, we've let Steph know in no uncertain terms that we want him to retire here, and we're willing to work with that. But in the end, it's Steph's decision. And it reminds me a little bit about when we were talking about Draymond Green before he exercised his player option. And Mike kept saying, hey, that's Draymond's decision, whether he's going to opt out or not. That's up to Draymond. That's his decision. He earned it. And I feel like that's kind of what they're doing with Curry here, Goo.
Yeah.
Is they're just saying, look, we're here. It's now. We're still working, but we're not a finished product. So in the end, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and, just hearing you say that and just reading these tea leaves and hearing it again, it's kind of what it is. He's so Steph Curry that is presidential. If he were to get frisky and look around and, not even be mad, no venom, shout out Spider-Man, but just basically say, you know what, I'm on the back nine. Right now, this team is not ready to compete. And there would be grace in regard to a decision that monumental that would shake the Bay. But Mike also in that, roundtable signing, he also said he wanted Draymond and expects Draymond to retire, a Warrior. A lot to be seen on that front. But I'll say this about Mike. I disagree, and I'm not saying I know as much or more basketball than Mike Dunleavy. But it sounds like to me he really believes injuries derailed this team, and if health goes their way without adding, a player in free agency or trade, I'm really starting to believe he believes that they might have some action. And that would be the 9 or 12 win season for me last year, where I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a bear, and they did what they did. Forget the schedule. So I'm like, does Mike really believe that? But Stoney, the more I hear him talk and the actions or their lack of, I'm starting to think, okay, I'll watch it like the rest of us. Well, I don't see it, Bob, but I don't see it, Mike. I'm not sure that Mike is. Boy, how do I want to put this? The organization put out the information. And they made sure, the Warriors did, to make sure that everybody knew that the Warriors, when Jimmy Butler played during that stretch, had the fourth best record in the NBA, okay? Now, this is that kind of information that you can do with it what you will. I looked at those games and said they had a lot of favorable games in that situation. And they might have had the fourth best record in the league, but I'm not sure they were the fourth best team if they're completely healthy. But the reality of the situation is when you put that information out there, hey, everybody that's feeling bad about this team, look, when we had Jimmy Butler, we had the fourth best record in the league over that year. Okay, what it also does, and I think this is also part of it, what it also does is it makes it possible for Dunleavy to have an offseason like he had, or for the Warriors to strategize like they did and not do anything and say, we got to wait for these guys to get back so that we can get back to being that fourth best team. I don't believe it. I mean, I don't think that's going to translate like that, but I do believe there is something
inside the organization that they believe had Moody and Butler not gotten hurt, that, yes, they did have action. And the question now becomes, okay, fine. You thought they would have had action if those guys didn't get hurt, but now they did get hurt. So do you have action right now? And what Mike Dunleavy is saying is, I think we can improve internally to the point where if we get those guys back, they can give us a boost at the end of the year, and then all bets are off.
Yeah, and, over the weekend I text you and Evan, I heard, and it didn't come out of Lakeup or Dunleavy's mouth, but a gap year for the Warriors. And, again, it wasn't the powers to be that it said that, nor the players, but I'm like, how the hell do you have Steph Curry and, we're talking about a gap year. That is telling you, hey, look, it might not pop this year. So I don't like that. And, again, that didn't come out of the FO's mouth. But I'm starting to just analyze Mike D from this vantage point. When you say you didn't make a move on a Monday, I'm like, okay, that sounds to me like that was by choice, because what I'm saying is what he echoed, we're good here. You know what? Nothing was worth using our assets or our future draft capital. We're good. But also in that same call, he talked about Mike Dunleavy making cold calls. And if people knew how many cold calls he made, I'm paraphrasing, we would be impressed. And I'm like, again, nobody asked me, but I'm sharing, Stoney. I don't want to hear about cold calls, because now that's telling me that you knew you needed something. You made calls. Certain calls, how many, I don't know, but you didn't close any. So which one is it? You're good, and then the books will reset, and then I'll get going? Or we're good, we're going to get healthy? Or you want us to know, because I wouldn't have said it to the reporters, that I made a bunch of cold calls but came up empty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with him sharing that information. Look, he could call every team in the league.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take an expert to look at the roster and say they don't have players that are coveted. They just don't. The players they have coveted would be Steph Curry, and they're not moving him at least at this point. So, look, I've asked this question a million times. Look on their roster.
Right.
What play? I bet you Mike Dunleavy made 5 calls to every call he received. Why do I say that? Because I see the roster. Name me a player that somebody's calling the Warriors about on this roster. There's just not a lot of players that other teams are really seeking. So,
but that's a problem in itself, right?
Yeah, for the short term, for the next year, I think it is.
Like,
absolutely.
I guess the word I'm using, Steiny, or looking for is, who's to blame for that? That you have nobody covets your players outside of 30. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
that's a byproduct of Joe and Mike.
Well, people might not like to hear this, but probably the guy they get the most calls about is Podziemski. But the Warriors like Podziemski, and by all indications, they're going to try to re-sign him. And, I think it's interesting. I think Podziemski's without getting too detailed, he's a good young player, Podziemski. But a lot of people don't think he's very good. But I guarantee you he's probably the player, maybe not right now, because now you're going to have to pay Podziemski.
Right.
But a year ago, I'll bet you Podziemski was a guy that was called about. But the Warriors, I get it. They don't have a superstar in their young core.
Hopefully, yeah.
But the reality of the situation is they're so old that even their young players who just project into role players, they've got to be careful about trading, because they need these guys. They need young players, because the old guys are not going to play very much, or, as much as most starting lineups.
Pods plays, what did he play, 82?
I think he did last year.
So, and, you've been married to him from the start. There's always, the old line, there's a cost of doing business. And why would you give up on a guy that's available in pods? You've gone through the puberty of watching him grow, and now you think the best is yet to come. So I understand. And again, nobody was offering a king's ransom for pods, I don't believe. But you're right. their young talent outside of Yaxel is questionable at best. So I told you, and I stand on it, I expect Pods to get his money. When, I don't know. But why would you walk away from him when you've seen what he's delivered in his young career for you?
I mean, the one thing that, I'm anxious to know kind of what Warrior fans feel like about this. Look, we know they didn't have any money this offseason. Draymond had to opt out to even give him access to the mid-level. So he opts out, and it becomes clear that what I'm convinced of at this point is it was all about LeBron James, and that's it. It was either they were going to get LeBron James or they were going to do nothing.
Yeah. It sounds like it wasn't even close, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, no. Yeah. But what they also decided clearly, as it relates to guys like Anthony Simons or Garland or
Sexton.
Maybe even Hachimura, they clearly decided those players were not good enough to have under contract next season. They just didn't think any of those players were worth having on the team under contract at a set amount of money going into next season. It's clear to me the only players that are getting extensions or that are going to be traded for are players that they want on this team in 2 or 3 years. And this was the summer where after they didn't get LeBron James, they bit the bullet. And they said, fine, we're not giving anybody any deals for the year after this upcoming one, with the exception of Steph Curry if he wants it. And then we will go from there with relatively clean books.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, they look like they're being passive.
Mm-hmm. And I'll put it right on the table, brought to you by Echo Pest Control early. If I really could just have a one-on-one conversation with my favorite player, maybe my all-time favorite Bay Area athlete, Steph Curry, Stoney, I would truly, truly ask him and tell him, I know you're a killer. I know you're an assassin. We've seen it. But if this thing around Steph Curry, and I'm assuming health with the runner's knee for the sake of my take here, I mean, I want nothing more than for Steph Curry to retire a Golden State Warrior. But if he continues to resemble the guy that he's been when he's healthy on the court, and this team realistically is 2 or 3 years away with what's around him, I guess I don't want to tell Steph to leave, but Stoney, I got to believe everybody has a point to where, yeah, Goo, I want to stay here, but man, I also want to win. And if it's not 1, but 2 and maybe 3 seasons of not winning and watching my peers go on playoff runs, like, more power to Steph if that's not enough for him to kind of feel a little frisky. So I'm curious to see what pops off August 29th or what doesn't happen. Or I'll ask you this as I wrap it up. Do you think the Warriors got to pull a rabbit out of their hat even when their books are reset and funds are not a problem?